straight away from the get go. So just keep that one in mind. And what's the other one? Because your style is object title, which works. This one
Yeah,
was water, so it's like, all right, yeah. And the person just keeps scrolling
yeah,
through. There's
yeah.
not suddenly grabs the customer. Um, what was it called? Geez, that jumped up to 5 straight away. So that's a good start anyway to our live stream. That's probably your actually your lot probably in very well. Actually, no, it's actually my lot in there instantly.
I didn't. I was very busy today, and I was working all day. I didn't announce it, so sometimes
Yeah,
I do. It varies dramatically. But I
yeah,
told a
yeah,
few people I would be doing it.
yeah. I have to quickly jump over like yourself and make sure that's turned on as well. What was it? I heard YouTube is under new management now. That
Right?
there's
That I
a
didn't hear.
Yeah, they're no longer under the same branch. People don't, from what I heard, people don't like the new management and stuff because of the way that they put the format of YouTube. That it's gone more short heavy rather than video heavy. That when you go on the home screen, there's more pictures of
Yeah,
shorts, actual
I've been
videos.
hearing that. I've been hearing loads of people complain about that.
Yeah, which is annoying again. Yeah, I getting paid right now, so that's not too bad. Bum, bum, bum. And I'll just go over and see if it's all kicking off on the other side because sometimes the comments and stuff don't get through. I like Jim O'Neill's one there. Hey Jim, how you keeping? Funny how
Oh,
oh yeah, it's getting through now. Your
yeah,
comment
the
was a bit
turn.
slow on the other side there, Jim. Get the old
Hi,
T
Jim.
going.
Nice to see you.
Got the old T going this morning. Get the brain up and going. And Kevin's comment just came through as well. The comments this morning on the other side are a wee bit slow. How's Caveman doing? Any news with yourself? I'll change the picture because everyone will think it's the Gaelic resurgence. See if
Yeah,
I
you
put the
better.
default picture up. And I'll change the. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Slowly waking up this morning. We got Nomi Hall this morning. He's off with the kids have gotten sick, wasn't it? And they have the emergency. So, Nomi Hall this morning. So, anyone who's looking for me Hall, we'll try to get him back again later. Good evening. How are you keeping? That's one of your lads on calling in to see
Okay,
you.
because it's telling me I got no views on my YouTube yet.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Hi
that's your.
everyone. Hi Jim. Hi Caveman. Hi TJWK.
Oh yeah, yeah. The response is a bit slow because that was your lot. They're coming in and liking your stuff, but it's your one suddenly jumped up to 11, so your algorithm is actually buzzing. It could be actually why
Oh,
it's slightly slow because your algorithm suddenly jumped up to what was it called 11 and stuff. If
okay.
you're
You're telling
over
me
in
no.
Owen's one, do Owen a favor there and giving him a like so his algorithm will continue boosting up. How's Kevin this morning? Any news with yourself? What's it called? Jeez, have you been looking at the shorts and the videos for Bridget? I still haven't watched your video on Bridget yet, so I can't criticize your video yet.
It's doing well. It's doing well. But
Hmm.
I thought I a couple of people have complained that I'm not being fair by using facts and that the facts are written down by Christians and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Actually, do you know what? I can actually go and have a buzzy. I'm going to fly over to your comment section. How you keeping, lads?
well,
Just saying hi
would
to
be
everyone
nice.
who's jumping in.
Caveman, my own clan became a cadet branch of Maguire's during the Gaelic resurgence. Clan
Mm,
MacManus emerges in 1351. Interesting.
mm.
Of course, the most famous modern MacManuses were in a famous band from Monaghan. I'm
Yeah.
fairly sure. Mama's Boys in the 1980s.
Mm,
Um, Thanks, Cleavon. Mama's Boys, they were a sort of a hard rock band that did well for a while, but I think one of them got sick or something, and I think
Yeah.
some of them are still going. I think it was three brothers, three McManus brothers. It could have been from Carrick McCross, but I could be very wrong.
I'm going to be very judgmental about this one. I'm just scanning through your comments there for your new video, Owen, and I'm sick of people saying pre-Christian. Are you getting sick of that? It's all this
No,
stuff
I
is
use
written
it.
on.
I use it a lot because pagan is a prejudiced word.
Yeah.
Pagan is like bullshit.
Mm,
Sort of archaeologists use pre-Christian now because like in a way because it means before Ireland became Christian.
yeah.
Um, pagan, it basically means someone who's not living in a city. I
Yeah.
know it now the way it's used. It means someone who is a non-Christian, but
Mm,
it had like pagan heathen as
yeah.
opposed to pre-Christian. I know that pagans, modern pagans, like the word, but I
Yeah.
alternate. I alternate.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that recently as well. I think it's Gone Medieval was talking about that as well, how it became slang for city people against country people going into the High Middle Ages. Because you can
Yeah,
be, it was in medieval Ireland, you can be a pagan. I think it was mostly used on the Anglo Saxons against the Gaul Gael when they were, well, the Norsemen as they were calling them in England. Oh, sorry, the Danes, because they were calling everybody Danes in England. Everybody was non English at the time in the
yeah,
10th century. And they were calling the Gaul Gael, Citric Emer's lot, pagan, although he was considered Christian in Ireland, allegedly. But Citric Emer was funny. If you look at the effigies that they are erecting in England in the 10th century, they have crosses with Jesus on it, but then they have depictions of like Odin, Loki, so on and so forth on it. And then also in Iceland as well at the time, areas that are, Gaul Gael influenced as well. Um, what was it called? Norse Viking, oh, sorry, Norse Irish Viking, or whatever you want to call it in English, but in Irish they're referred to as the Gaul Gael. Um, you also have, what was it, crosses as well with what's his name, Fairmere on it. The big wolf
yeah,
pagan god on it. So there seems to be a mixture of both Scandinavian beliefs mixed with the belief in Jesus Christ in Ireland when it comes down to the city Viking people or whatever you want to call them. I know, all right, that in recent interviews, all right, people have identified that even Viking is used as a kind of, FU term.
yeah,
You're a Viking, get away from me. And that warrior was actually a phrase that was actually praised. If you were referred to as warrior, it's like, oh, you're great. But if someone called you a pirate, they're just like, being, it's a pure mockery. It's, get away from me, you disgusting creature.
yeah.
Which is
But
funny.
it's funny. I like this confusion of vocabulary because it always exists. In the
Yeah.
16th century, the English were basically saying that the Irish weren't Christians, they were savages, etc.
Mm,
In the earlier medieval period, the word heathen to me they use it for somebody who should be Christian,
yeah.
where a pagan originally meant country, then it meant sort of a non-Christian thing. And then in,
Yeah.
in the medieval and later medieval, you'll find a lot, especially church people, they'll use the word Gentile,
Yeah.
which is kind of a bad way to say pagan. So these words move around. And then I think
Mm,
if you look at the Reformation, um,
yeah.
one of the clans we mentioned last week, McGrath, there was a
Yeah.
there was a guy, Miller McGrath from Donegal, and he
Yeah.
was a Catholic bishop, then he became Protestant. So he jumped. And I
Yeah.
imagine, like in the 8th century, 9th century, people would flip over. You may have been
Mm,
baptized Christian, ended up with pagan Norse,
yeah.
practiced that, and then gone back to being a Christian again.
Mm, mm, mm.
Sometimes out of choice, sometimes not out of choice. Um,
But I,
I
I
think
think it's, yeah, go on.
I was going to say that it's just, I know that the BBC made a series about a Norse Norse and Saxon around the time of Alfred the Great.
Mm,
Uther, was it
yeah.
Uther or
Mm,
something like that? Up in the north of England, and he
yeah.
shows the flicking over, the moving between Bernard Cornwell.
Mm,
Uh, he shows how people moved between religions quite a lot,
yeah.
and
But it does look like that. But I have a theory that I don't think they're. I think from an outsider's perspective, they're switching religions. But I don't think they're switching whatsoever. I have a feeling that they're keeping all their identities, as in they're worshiping Jesus and they're doing their
yeah,
Odin stuff as well. Because anytime a Viking gets into trouble, the very first thing they do is they go and hide in a church. You can see that one of the best examples, obviously, is Brian Brew. When Brian Brew is
yeah,
chasing after Ivor of Limerick, the first thing he does is running into a church to go and hide.
yeah,
And I think I've seen other examples of that as well, where you can see, and you're also seeing it in mainland Europe as well, where the moment somebody's in trouble, the first thing to do is go running in the church. Oh, Jesus will hide me, And I
yeah,
think it's this whole idea that, you know, what was it? The Christian God and Jesus are people that are good. They'll hide you, where Odin and other people are used for different
Well, it was that like the
situations.
church. The church was a place of sanctuary.
Yeah,
And then I know in Bernard, thanks Dennis for Last Kingdom. That's what the series was called. He
yeah,
shows like sort of people in that series. Again, it's invention, but I think it points to something. Someone
mm,
who is a Christian,
yeah,
but they're dying, and they want to hold a sword in their hand when they're dying,
yeah,
so to go just in case.
yeah,
Sort of, I think people are always much more flexible with religion than their
yeah.
priests or whatever a pagan priest would be called.
Yeah,
Sort of they
I
sort
think
of
so as well.
and they go. So there's a few comments coming in. There's a few
Yeah, yeah.
comments coming in. Tom McCore says his daughter Bridget will be baptized and confirmed tomorrow.
Mm,
Congratulations. I hope you have a good day.
mm,
Maronite Catholics are confirmed the day of their baptism. There would be war. There'd be ructions if that happened in Ireland because
oh,
um, like the first communion and
mm,
confirmation are big days here, and like big celebrations, and a lot of people get a lot of money, and a lot
mm,
of people spend money on the clothes. um um Caveman could be okay. He's replying to my comment about the McManus Mamas boys. I have a few
mm,
McManus around the Fermanagh, Monaghan, and Tyrone. A few in bands. My great grandfather was in the Harp of Air and he played the fiddle. Oh, very
mm.
nice, very nice. Hi, hi, Dennis. Hi, David
You're
Jones.
keeping Dennis.
My castle needs some fixing. It does. Some bad guy called Cromwell, and then before that, Elizabeth. They blew it up. I'm waiting for a grant. I'm waiting for a grant to rebuild it.
Mm.
So that thing's going to take a lot of money.
There
What's
is a
the
good,
crack?
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was about to cover
What's
that
the
one actually.
yeah? Do you want to throw it up?
Yeah, yeah.
What's the crack with the Saint Bridget controversy?
Yeah, that's the one that everybody's talking about. You actually covered it. I actually have to watch your video because your video is very important with the debate. Did you watch? Have you been keeping up with Medieval Irish podcast by Maynooth University, and also on top of that, Finn Dwyer's latest video as well on
I didn't. I
Saint
saw it, but I
Bridget.
didn't listen to it because I had
Yeah,
just finished writing mine when I
ah,
saw his,
yeah,
and I listened. I actually mentioned in the references the Medieval Irish History podcast, and then
mm,
I use an article by what's her name, the professor, the lady who does the podcast, and whose name
yeah,
I can't remember. Her and another professor, Elva Johnson. They're very good in that period, religion
mm,
in that period. So, by controversy, I presume he's referring to whether Saint Bridget actually existed, and
yeah,
B, was the saint? Did the
yeah,
saint come from a goddess?
yeah,
And Niamh Wycherley is the name because
mm,
her doctorate is on Saint Bridget,
yeah,
And she actually says she started off kind of believing that Saint Bridget, the saint, the person, didn't
mm,
exist, but she says that there's too much evidence that Saint Bridget
yeah,
existed. There's probably more evidence that Saint Bridget existed than some other important saints.
mm,
And resuming about the goddess, there is three lines in a manuscript called Cormac's Glossary, and
mm,
that's what people take to be the main evidence for Bridget the Goddess. Except
yeah,
those three lines were written in the 10th century,
mm,
and secondly, in the medieval, there's a Bridget also appeared. No, Bridget with a slightly different name appears in the Second Battle of Moytura, but
yeah,
probably only in a manuscript that dates to the late medieval period.
mm,
Um, and finally, there's no evidence relating this goddess to Imbolc,
mm,
to the 1st of February.
yeah,
Um, so, and like the idea of her, of Bridget being a goddess, was first mentioned in 1880 by a French guy. It gets
mm,
picked up by Maud Gonne,
mm,
who possibly because she was herself and Yeats and a few of the other Anglo-Irish were into the occult,
mm,
um, and like they were members of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which Aleister Crowley was a member of.
yeah,
So I think she liked the idea of changing a Catholic into a pagan goddess. Then it kind of gets forgotten, and it's only in the 1990s that the idea
yeah,
becomes really popular, and now it's become huge.
mm,
But there's no real evidence for it.
yeah, yeah. I think like the only real connection between Saint Bridget being a goddess is the connection between the what was it, the Burgundies or whatever they're called up in the north of York region.
Yeah,
That's the only connection I can see there. So there may have been there was a few people had a very very good comment to say, saying that there could have been a goddess originally there, and it's funny how Saint Bridget is the saint of so and so, so and so, and so so. You know, smithing,
yeah,
fire, or whatever, right? So there may have been something there. And going into the period of the 6th century, and this is also why people have the theory as well, is that there might have been multiple Bridgets. There may have been one at the very start of the 6th century, and then another one appear halfway into the 6th century as well, which to me sort of makes sense as well. Um, because the name Saint was it sorry the name Bridget at the time may have been popular, but somebody in my comment section made a good point that it may have been popular originally because there was already a goddess there, and that when you're going into the 6th century, there may have somebody who'd taken on the role of priestess or whatever, and then when it converted over going into the 6th century, because there's massive level of conversion happening in the 6th century, that the what was it, the priestess Bridget may have then become the abbess Bridget, and that it is just kind of coincidence that she's called Bridget, which is similar to Burgundies or whichever what's it called is going on. Do, do, do.
yeah. The the topic at the moment is we're talking about Saint Bridget. It's a chat about Irish history.
Yeah,
Um, I understand that point, except the thing about being the goddess of fire, smithing, etc., poets, that's a 10th century
got rid
that
of that
appears
gobshite there anyway. Here,
that
lads,
appears
I'm just going to be honest with you there. Give us a level of respect, We're doing this literally. I don't see people giving us much more money. So coming on to the chat and talking to me like I'm subhuman or something, I'm going to get you bounced out quick as, That level of fucking cheek off some people, like, especially talking to Owen like that, do you know? Absolutely
you're
bloody
the old
dreadful,
one.
like. What's that?
You're the old one.
Oh Jesus Christ! Like he'd be talking to me old one. I wouldn't mind. Anytime you approach these people in real life, then they're like, do you know? Bro,
Yeah.
brave behind a camera screen, but then when they come on to when you see them in a pub or something, brave boys, like, do you know? Sorry about that
Oh,
one.
no problem, no problem. So like, yeah, the name of the Brigantes, and there possibly may have been a goddess with Briga or something like that in northern England.
Mm,
But there were loads and loads of gods and goddesses in Britain and in Ireland. We don't know the names of most. And I think this thing about push, like saying that there's there could have been a goddess, but the evidence
mm,
isn't there. And when what people do is they go backwards from the saint to a
yeah,
goddess, whereas nobody in there was no attempt to cover up by the church by the people who wrote the biographies, and they come within 100. I think the first one is within a century of her death.
mm,
So there was no she was a poor person. She was someone who, unlike most of the saints, did a lot of work with the poor.
yeah,
And then there are some, like there is one miracle she did which could be perceived as abortion,
yeah,
because one of her, I think it was a nun, or one of the ladies with her, was
mm,
suddenly pregnant,
yeah,
and Saint Bridget kind of touches her and the pregnancy disappears.
yeah,
And but at that stage, as far as I know, the in Gaelic Ireland, not in Gaelic Ireland, until a couple of centuries ago, for the Catholic Church, the soul only entered the body at some time called the quickening.
mm,
Nowadays, Catholic theology says the soul, like the fetus, I think at the moment of conception is when they get the soul. But I don't want to go into
mm,
too much into theology, but in medieval
yeah,
times it was different. So Saint Bridget does this miracle, which is written down. Uh,
yeah,
you could perceive it in a certain way. Um,
mm,
Wicked Felina's asking, didn't the Irish language change three times? It changed more than that. It changed a lot over the centuries.
mm.
In the third or fourth, or maybe fourth or fifth century, there was a big change in its pronunciation.
Oh,
Um, they kind of dropped a syllable at some stage, and
mm,
around the time Ireland becomes Christian, maybe before that, there are people in Ireland who can read Latin,
mm,
and they take Latin grammar and import it and apply it to Irish with
yeah,
changes. And then
mm,
like we now speak, or most of us will know some modern Irish.
yeah,
Modern Irish basically dates from the downfall of the Gaelic world in 1600.
yeah,
Before that, I think they would call it early modern Irish.
mm,
There's a debate when it starts, but probably at least 500 BC, if not more.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so it changes a lot. It changes a lot over time.
mm.
There's a whole pile of comments coming in. I'm not. Do you want to start in this one? I'm getting a bit lost in the comments
No, just some decent what was it called, points rather than comments, to be
yeah,
honest with you. Um
because I know
one of my
nothing
lads
about
there.
Maronites. I know nothing about Maronite as opposed to Catholic.
Yeah, I'm just saying right now as well, all these other branches, I'm completely oblivious with one modern branches, to be honest with you. But lads bring up very good points as well. With the insular Christianity. And this is something I have a problem with a lot of people's modern interpretation, and this whole bad mouthing of Christianity, because I notice as well, and this is why I'm not a huge fan of people. Like I know you were justifying the term pre-Christian and pagan and stuff, but the only thing that annoys me this year is like a group of people got a hold of that word within the pop history world on YouTube and stuff, and over romanticizing paganism, especially with the whole Saint Bridget controversy and stuff, has been kind of annoying. And then the lack of understanding of what is insular Christianity going into the 6th, 7th, and 8th century. I find very strange as well. Like they talk about Christianity in the 5th, 6th, and 8th century like it's the modern Roman Catholic Church, you know, and they kind of make it into this evil enemy that it's going around doing all this evil stuff and it's all corrupt and so on and so forth. And I feel like when I'm listening to people, that they're definitely, whipping in a modern interpretation. So they're talking about, look at the evils of Christianity. Wasn't life better in pre-Christian Ireland? And I even seen that interview on Tommy Tiernan 2 weeks ago. I don't even know what the poor woman's name was, but she came on to Tommy Tiernan's interview and stuff, and she was romanticizing pre-Christian Ireland and how evil things have gotten since the arrival of Christianity and stuff. And then she was talking about Breton law and stuff, and I was thinking to myself, but your Breton law and all of that stuff that we have today, all that writing and everything was done in the, what was it called, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th century, even the 10th century. And those interpretations come down from what was it called, the Christian church of the early medieval period. It doesn't come down from pagans. So I find it very strange when people over romanticize a pagan interpretation when we honestly don't know what a pagan interpretation is, because of the fact that we're looking through the eyes of Christian writers like.
Yeah, yeah, good. You made some good points there.
Mm,
Like I think paganism, neo-paganism,
yeah,
has a serious history problem.
yeah,
I also think that in the United States, um, many of them must have picked up an anti-Catholicism,
yeah,
which which you'll find in some parts of Northern England, you'll find in parts of Northern Ireland, and a
mm,
lot in parts of the United States. It's this idea that comes from the Reformation that Rome
mm,
is the beep of Babylon. I won't say
yeah,
Tommy Gama came on Tommy Gama. It like
mm,
this idea that Rome is the source of all evils, etc., etc., etc.
mm,
And that has kind of passed into neo-paganism, and like you have some very interesting ideas in neo-paganism, etc. But you
yeah,
have some bizarre things, like we've talked about Saint Patrick before.
yeah, mm,
Um, so, and the thing about the Catholic Church changes. It changes
mm,
enormously. It's been very, very, very good at portraying throughout a history that is universal.
mm,
Whereas, I remember I was in Brussels once, and I wandered into this church, and I said, I must have gone into an Eastern Orthodox church. And my cousin who lived in Belgium, he said, no, that's I think the Bulgarian Orthodox. It's a Catholic church. It's under the Catholic Church, but it's a different sort of way. The Maronites, I think, are under the Catholic Church.
mm,
Um, so, like, I remember when I first went to Brazil, I was doing some tour and there was an outdoor mass, and people were
mm,
praying with their hands like this, like a surrender
yeah,
motion.
mm,
And I was saying, "What is that?" And that was the way of praying. The saints were different, so the church is different in different things. And then another point is that, like some people, they talk about Celtic Christianity.
mm,
Christianity in Ireland was always under Rome. It
yeah,
followed its own path because it was developing outside the borders of the Roman Empire. It's
mm,
only from around like 10,000, not 10,000, 1,000 AD, maybe slightly later, that you start, Malachi comes in, they start bringing in reforms, and bringing in dioceses. Well, the dioceses are a bit earlier.
mm,
Um, and they try to impose this um, a more Roman structure on it. But in terms of theology, it was always Roman. Um,
mm,
Wickefillian makes a point. Just because paganism existed before Christianity doesn't mean everything Christian that is good is pagan. Yeah.
mm,
Um, so there were good things in Christianity. There were bad things, and the same. I'm sure if we go back to pagan Ireland, we'd be
mm,
horrified by some stuff.
yeah,
Some stuff would have been good, but the problem about it, pagan Ireland before Christianity, we don't have sources. In
yeah,
fact, I think we can understand more about the religion in the Bronze Age and the Neolithic period
mm,
because of what is left, stone circles, or for the Neolithic, the passage tombs and stuff like that, than we did for than we do for Gaelic paganism. We have
mm,
very little. A lot of what we have is invented or written down much later,
Mm,
and we don't know what was invented and what's an actual tradition. I have a feeling that mountains and wells, like if you want to look for authentic Gaelic paganism, go up mountains. Croagh
mm,
Patrick must have been a sacred mountain well before Christianity.
mm,
Outside Killarney, there's a Paps Danu, the Paps of
mm,
Anu. Again, it's two sacred mountains, and there's I think you can do a trail of mountains that are sacred to the Catholic Church in Ireland, but most of
mm,
them are go back much further. And I'm
mm.
sure wells, because there's holy wells everywhere in Ireland, and
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of them were sacred before.
Mm,
Um, Davey's asking about the Celtic Church and the Roman Church have some argument in Northumberland. It
mm,
was some sort of synod or hi Kira, Croagh Patrick, yeah. There was a synod there. So basically, the Irish Church, they studied their mathematics and their calendars, and they worked out one way of measuring Easter,
mm.
which is something very complicated. It's got to do with the moon, and it
Yeah.
it it differed from how the Roman Catholic Church did it,
Mm,
um, and so they ended up on different days, and they had like so. I think 6th, 7th century, Irish monks are going from Scotland down into England,
yeah.
where
Yeah.
converting the Saxons,
Mm,
whereas under St. Augustine, they're coming upwards from the south
mm.
up. And they kind of meet in Northumberland I think they had a synod in Whitby.
Yeah.
My
The
my,
sort of way, but
my knowledge of geography is a bit. I think Whitby is not too far from Lindisfarne. It's
yeah.
that general area, and it's
Yeah.
also
You're right.
associated with Dracula. I'm fairly sure.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, I think there's a Gothic festival there every year because I'm fairly sure in the book, you know, Dracula comes to England by this boat, and
Uh,
it drifts in. I think it drifts into Whitby because it's kind of
mm,
dark there. So what was I saying? Yeah, so they meet in Whitby, and the king
mm,
there, he's trying to decide whether to go with Rome or go with Ireland, and he decides to go with Rome.
mm.
But I'm not going to go into more details because I don't understand them. It's really complicated, this
Mm.
argument.
It was, what was it? Dr. Damien Brackett actually believes that because they did the calculation in the recent years, and Dr. Damien Brackett believes that the Irish Church was actually right in their calculation of the correct day of Easter. But he also added it's quite interesting as well because the insular Christianity is heavily, especially early on, is heavily, influenced by the Coptic Church, um, which is interesting in itself because a lot of these collisions and clashes and disagreements comes from Alexandria. Alexandria is the place where a lot of these theology beliefs that dominate the Roman Church come from as well. And of course, the thick Irish in the corner of the map can't be as intelligent as Alexandria with its big, massive library. Well, before it burns down, anyway. So that's interesting itself because Coptic Church was very dominant up around that region of Egypt and also around Ethiopia. Because a
Yeah.
lot of people say that Ethiopia was the original Christian areas, which is interesting in itself because didn't somebody else say as well that Ethiopia used to be it was full of Jewish people in Ethiopia and that they had gone from Judaism over to Christianity if I'm not mistaken.
No, no.
Um,
I remember. If do you remember Live Aid?
yeah,
I'm
go
showing
on.
my age.
Yeah.
So Live Age, there was a really, really bad famine in
Mm,
Ethiopia. That's
yeah.
what caused Live Aid.
Mm,
But at some stage during that,
yeah.
the Israelis airlifted. There was a group of Ethiopian Jews. They
Mm,
had converted to Judaism at some stage way
yeah.
back and
Mm,
remained Jewish, but the Israelis airlifted them and brought them to Israel.
Yeah.
Where I'm not sure what the situation is now, but
Yeah.
I know in regard to, like, if you what's his name? Holland, Tom Holland, who
Mm.
does, that history podcast. Some of his early books, they talk about Jewish kingdoms in the Arabian Peninsula, I think near Yemen, etc. At some stage. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the religions there changed massively, and we're not going to get into that because it's way too detailed and complicated.
Yeah.
But while visiting Newgrange, our guide theorized that its spiral carvings possibly were adapted into the St. Patrick tale. They looked like three snakes, and three together looked like shamrocks. Um, I'm kind of skeptical about stuff like this,
Mm.
like this arc thing, the the more common one, that St. Patrick picks a shamrock and uses that to explain the concept of the Trinity. Um,
Yeah, they always seem like something that came about around the 19th century. These
yeah,
tales that were added in around that period and stuff. Unless I see it in the original 10th century, it seems to like the problem is, especially around the 19th century, is that even stories that may have existed from around the 10th century and then over the years, like by the time they get up to the 19th century, it's like Chinese whispers. But the problem is that they're also adapting to the era itself. So by the time you get up to the 19th century, they're definitely not what the original story was,
yeah, yeah,
because if like something that's heavily, heavily documented, and I was looking at the other day, is Alice Kettler. If you look at the sources and the material from the period of Alice Kettler, and then you look at it, how it's changed in Ireland and what they say about Alice Kettler in the 19th, 20th, and even today, wow, it's completely different. You get two different Alice Kettlers altogether. It's just our modern interpretation today is so different to how it was in the 10th century. So, unless I can get a hold of the original source and actually read what the literature says, I'm very doubtful for a lot of things because we completely changed the meaning to a lot of these original tales. Like Alice Kettler back in the day, in the 10th century, everyone's very what was it called? Careful with our wording.
yeah.
And Alice Kettler isn't seen as a villain in the what was it called? The what was it, 14th century when she's alive, around 1310. She's not seen as a villain. People are very questionable to what exactly is going on during this trial and stuff. But then when you go into the 19th century and you listen to the likes of that famous folklorist Eddie. What was his name?
Eddie
Oh,
Lennon,
his second name is gone.
Lennon.
Yeah, that's the one. If you listen to what he's saying, oh my God, she went up and down the street on a what was it called, a broomstick,
Yeah,
cursing everybody with her finger. Scissors out of her finger and stuff. That's the kind of way he describes her and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, that's completely different to the original
yeah. His
source.
history is like it's folklore. It's not history,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and a lot of history is very wrong in folklore.
Mm, yeah.
Like, if you take the Battle of the Curlew Mountains, there's folklore
Mm,
about Reggie O'Donnell at the battle,
yeah.
whereas he probably arrived after battle was over because the battle took about 30 minutes. It was like Kinsale.
Mm,
The
yeah.
English, like the English were advancing. Their cavalry got thrown back and ran through their own men, and then everybody ran.
Mm, mm,
And basically, the only people there was O'Rourke's guys. They
yeah.
were the vanguard of the Irish,
Mm,
and sort of there's a load of folklore about it, which has
yeah.
nothing to do with the battle.
Mm, mm, mm,
You
mm.
have to be careful with how things build up.
Well, my point being there is that because of, as you pointed out there, folklore and stuff, people's interpretation have gone, especially in the 19th century, seem to have gone way over there. Because you were even making a point about, I think it was either a few weeks back out or on a live stream, or it was, you said it at some point, you were talking about the Tuatha De Danann and how the Tuatha De Danann definitely changed going up to the 19th century as well.
Yeah,
But there's massive changes in our understanding. And I think a large part of that is, my interpretation is down to folklore and local stories and stuff going, so and so, blah, 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 blah. And then just going off on there and, saying mad stories, which are entertaining, don't get me wrong. But the interpretation's way over there.
Yeah, yeah, and it's because like if you if you look at the original mythology, like the stories of Fionn McCool or the stories of Cuchulainn,
Mm,
in Cuchulainn especially, there's something quite old,
yeah,
but there's other ones which is just you can say someone wrote this story to entertain people, like the
yeah,
Battle of Ventry, um, is it's a great story, and you can just see someone telling this story, and it's completely mad. The
mm,
king of the world comes, and he brings the king of Gaul and the king of this place, the king of this place. They stop, and there's some Irish guy with them who'd had a fight with the king of Ireland, so he's there, and he brings them. And they stop at Skellig Michael, and then they
mm,
go to Ventry. It's obviously
yeah,
written by someone from Kerry, from probably the Dingle Peninsula near Ventry, because he knows the area. And
yeah,
then sort of there's this guy with thousands and thousands of men, and like there's
mm,
three Fenian guys on guard. So they one of them runs off to warn everyone else, and the other two go down and say, "Look, there's only two of us, and I don't know how many thousands of you." So they agree kind of to have single combat for, and like loads of people get killed. The guy who goes off, he calls into the Tuatha Dé Danann because he's somehow related. In many of the Fenian stories, the Finnish,
mm,
some of the cool stories, many of the Fionn's men are grandsons or stepsons or godsons of Tuatha Dé Danann.
mm,
And he says, look, we need your help. So then he gets sent to another Tuatha Dé Danann place. And they say, yeah, fine. And so the Tuatha Dé Danann head off to Ventry and Kerry, and they beat
mm,
up the king of the king of the world's men for 2 or 3 days. And they said, right,
mm.
we've done enough, and go back. It's a great story. It's really funny to read, but it's
Yeah.
no good. It's history. It's you know,
Yeah, but that's also the problem as well. Like even in the 10th century itself, like I know I've just praised the 10th century and says, oh, we should spend more time reading 10th century literature. But that's also another example of the way that the Tuatha Dé Danann, the Irish gods and goddesses, have been like over folkalized, even in the 10th century. How they're grabbing these characters, and these are like Roman Christians writing about the Tuatha Dé Danann and grabbing these characters and then running away with them, to tell these
yeah,
big tales and stuff. Because it's just getting back to what a lot of people are talking about these days, which is Saint Bridget, was she a saint or a goddess? Because even in the writings during the 10th century, when it comes down to the Danann and this stuff, like how much of this information can we take seriously when we've got a Roman Christian interpretation? Because a lot of these gods, such as like the Morgan and the other various characters and stuff, I have a feeling that when the Roman Christians are writing about this, they're taking on a very Roman Greek god and goddess perspective rather than a quote unquote Celtic perspective, because
yeah,
I believe that when Celtic paganism existed within the Celtic world, that it was a case of it was more localized, that you would have had a local goddess, but the pronunciation may have been different to what it was down the road. And also, you would have had a very localized idea of what this goddess was like in your local area compared to Roman and Greek paganism, where it's much more centralized. Whereas in Rome, and the way that she's been worshipped in Rome is very similar to the way she's been worshipped in Britain, with slight, local differences and stuff.
yeah,
That's my
yeah.
interpretation.
I agree with you there, but one thing, like with Rome, I'm not so sure about Greece. With Rome,
Mm,
yes, you have the official, you have Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Mercury, etc. But you
mm,
have thousands and thousands of local gods. Because I think each household or family, they had their own personal gods. And
mm,
then archaeologists have discovered loads and loads and loads of shrines
mm,
to various gods. Like undoubtedly, the Roman garrisons and then Roman citizens in Gaul
mm,
uh, would they would have had their own local gods. Ronald Hutton's his book called Pagan Britain deals with this very well. He looks at Britain, Roman Britain, and pre-Roman Britain, and he shows there's a lot of archaeological evidence of lots of different gods, lots
Mm.
of different gods. So, and I think when, like, from the 19th century onwards, people have this idea that there was a pagan church in Ireland beforehand. I
Mm.
don't think there was. There would have been it. There would have been. Think of all the saints there are in Ireland.
Yeah.
Sort of. Everywhere has its own local saint. You would
Mm.
have had loads of local gods, and
Yeah.
mm, and in fact, I'm not even sure if they would use the word God. It would have been some sort of supernatural entity.
Yeah.
Um, there's a there is quite a bit of evidence for what's his name. The like he comes up in some early Christian texts. It's not Baal.
Mm.
Um, it's Crum Crua. Crum Crua
Mm.
seems to have been important in quite a few places.
Yeah.
Um, but the Victorians invented, like many of the people who translated in the 19th century, there's of a huge amount of the Gaelic stuff that is translated was translated in the 19th century, and it's it's in desperate need of a retranslation. And then
Mm.
this stuff gets rewritten in English, especially during the Celtic Renaissance, like Lady Gregory and stuff like that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then people now they read a book that's 4 or 5 generations at least away from the original source material.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and the original source material is really complicated to deal with because like the Book of Invasions,
Mm.
it's there's several different versions, and in each version kind of the stories that appear and don't appear.
Mm.
Like apparently the thing for Bridget appearing in the Battle of Motura occurs is only found in in the newest version. So
Mm.
it's and then actually I read a book last year about Tara, and Maeve apparently looks like have been a god related to Tara, a goddess.
Mm.
Maeve, who then becomes Queen of Connacht. So
Yeah.
it's complicated.
Mm.
Caveman
Mm.
is saying Goddess Kathleen killed the good god Dag in mythology with a poison dart. She's the goddess Enniskillen is named after. Yeah, if you dive into place names and stuff like that, you're going to find loads and loads and loads of supernatural beings, gods, whatever. So it's much more than a pantheon. It's a multitude of gods.
Yeah, I believe that as well because you can see that here in both Okinawa and What was it? Me and my wife were talking about that. In Okinawa and in Taiwan, you have so many local gods and goddesses. Like you literally just go over the hill here, and they're worshiping. They have a local god in the area that is part of nature and so on and so forth. And also on top of that as well, there's influences coming in from Thailand, where if you were to move a house, you have to build a shrine because you're disturbing the local god. So they build a shrine and then they're worshiping a new god again. And on top of that as well, they also worship in Okinawa. They also worship their ancestors. So they'll build another house for their ancestors and stuff. So they worship their ancestors. They worship a local nature god, and also on top of that, they worship their own family members. And there's another one as well where you have people that become very famous. They build entire shrines and stuff and start to worship them as well. In Thailand, the biggest god is actually a god that is a military hero who got famous in the 14th century, sorry, the 11th century. And now there's an entire massive temple dedicated to him. So it's quite easy to end up becoming a god or goddess in both Taiwan, sorry, and in Okinawa. Especially in Taiwan. Taiwan, they're mad into worshiping left, right, and center. Because we were looking at that yesterday. And it's quite funny because Buddhism is very, very popular in the whole region. And Buddhism, when Buddha was asked, "Oh, do you believe in God or a goddess?" and he says, "I don't know if they exist whatsoever." He says you can worship them, absolutely no problem, but I don't know if a god or goddess existed. And now a lot of people even look at him as though he was a god or goddess. So Although Buddhism is the most popular religion of all, that's very questionable if that's a religion or a philosophy.
Yeah, and it's in the Reformation, and since the Reformation,
Mm,
Catholics have been accused of worshiping saints, of
yeah,
worshiping Mary,
yeah,
whereas Catholics don't.
yeah,
They venerate. Don't ask me to
massively.
go to the difference, but there is a difference.
Oh yeah,
Chris,
that's causing a lot of fighting in America right now, actually, because
yeah,
in America you can see the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, and there's endless amount of shorts where you have presidents popping up on my screen as I'm flicking through, and you'll have a president come on and he'll talk about, and also people who do Judaism and stuff, talk about how the Roman Catholics and the Orthodox Christians commit idolism all the time because we have statues up of various. And this is funny as well because they accuse Buddhism of doing the same thing as well, because a lot of people do statues of the Buddha,
okay.
but the Buddhism is interesting as well because Buddhism have the exact same response that Roman Catholics and Orthodox Christians have out in Asia, which is it's not to worship, it is to kind of remind you, kind of,
To venerate, to venerate.
yeah, to venerate. This is a good example. It's not there to worship whatsoever, actually. This is a very good question of Davy Jones that I actually want to smash out before we continue pushing through. Also, something that after that argued Rome, sadly, for the Irish monks, their church in Iona, Ireland, Vikings showed up and killed them all. Something actually, do you know what? There's another question of Davy Jones I want to go back to. It wasn't actually that one. Ba, 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 ba. God, can I find it? Actually, random question. This is actually the one I wanted to answer. Did Irish monks ever start paying for local garrison to protect them? That's actually interesting, David Jones, the way you worded that one, because Cork is actually an exception to what you're saying there. Because in Cork, they did actually hire Viking mercenaries to protect St. Finbarr's monastic settlement in Cork. Because originally you have St. Finbarr's monastic settlement, and then right next to it you have South Main Street, which in around 840 is referred to as Cashel of Cork. And there seems to be signs of St. Finbarr's monastic settlement hiring Vikings to protect them against Cashel, because at the time you have the rise of Philmid MacCrivcon, who was king of Cashel, king of Munster at the time, and he was attacking Cork, and he actually at one stage actually successfully goes in there, sieges the Cashel, which is in present day St. Finbar, sorry, South Main Street, and the Cashel, which is a fortified structure in what was it, South Main Street, which was ran by the Vikings, which was hired by St. Finbarr's monastic settlement. It gets sieged by the men of Cashel. Philmid Crivcon, who was king of Munster at the time, he goes in there, he sieges Cashel. He successfully beats the Vikings inside there, and then from there he goes into St. Finbarr's monastic settlement, where he actually takes the bishop of Cork, brings him back to Cashel, and starves him to death. And that's recorded around 830, 840. So that's very interesting that you do actually have members of the clergy in St. Finbarr's hiring Vikings to protect them, Gaul Gael, to protect them against other Gael Irishmen at the time. So yeah, to answer your question, in the early medieval period, we do have members of the clergy not just hiring people for mercenary work, but actually hiring Gaul Gael, Irish Vikings, or whatever you want to call them. Like,
Yeah, just to add to that, like
mm,
a lot would depend on the monastic settlement, the monastery, the
mm,
size of it, because you see throughout the annals and throughout in more recent periods,
yeah,
churches, monasteries, convents, they all get attacked by everybody at
yeah,
different times. And
mm,
then having a monastery, having a and later or a big church or something in your lordship
mm,
was something quite prestigious. So you'll see that various kings, lords, nobles, they found
Mm,
monasteries, etc., like Muckross Abbey near
mm,
Killarney. That was founded by one of the McCarthy Moors. The
yeah.
O'Neills they kind of sponsored some sort of Franciscan monastery
Mm,
somewhere near Dungannon, and like Ardfert Cathedral in North Kerry again was related. Lislochton Abbey was the Abbey of O'Connor Kerry.
mm,
Um, and but this actually meant this was great for those monks in one way because they were sponsored. The local lord was their patron. However, in the event of some sort of conflict, they would often come in for, they'd often be attacked.
mm,
And then and this gets worse and worse.
yeah.
After the Reformation, the English especially the Puritan English, they would attack churches and cathedrals. They hated stained glass. There was a famous in Dublin. There was a famous relic of St. Patrick's staff, that was
Yeah.
burned in 1550 or something like that. Um, so there was a lot of they were in the early medieval period. Maybe they paid directly, but afterwards they were integrated into the lordship structure. And someone
Mm,
actually mentioned a couple of times. Someone has mentioned the Aeronauts, who were
yeah.
the people, the family groups that inherited. They are passed down among themselves the right to to look after certain monasteries, or
Yeah.
most church structures. They had an Aronach family, and I know
Mm,
Mihal has mentioned several on the podcast before. He
yeah.
said like
Yeah.
this family are from there, etc.
Mm, mm, mm. St. Columbus battled.
Along
That's the one
North.
that happened up around the, what was it called? The, oh god, when was that? The 7th century, where he causes that big massive. How do I word this without getting into trouble with YouTube? Where you have a mass, basically a lot of people end up getting chopped, and Saint Columbus is banished up to Iona, isn't it? That's the battle.
Yeah,
They got
Columba,
kind of out of
Columba.
hand. Yeah,
Yeah, the book of the Dune Cow.
yeah,
That's what he copied. He copied that, and then the local Brehon or the local priest said, to each cow its calf. So he had
yeah,
to return it. And then he got his Ken O'Connell guys to protest. And
yeah,
it was bloody.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then he imposed the penitence of leaving Ireland, and he went off to Iona and then onwards through other parts
Mm,
of Scotland.
yeah.
At least that's
Like
the story.
yeah, he seems to be exceptionally good once he gets up to Iona, running the administration and working with the Dalriada and stuff for him to be pushed up to sainthood and stuff. Although, yeah, he's quite a character in his own book as well, because he has a big biography as well, where he definitely must have been very good at the administration for him to have his own big biography, unless it's just very, very good propaganda by the Northern Email, that they could get somebody who caused the mess, chop chop, and then
Yeah.
suddenly have himself put into a big biography
Well,
later
it's
on.
probably a mix. As Kira says there, they were very bad boys. They were a lot of the
Yeah.
time. Um, so he does this. He heads off to Scotland. He must have been remarkable for that period because
Mm,
he gets remembered.
yeah.
In a way, he founds an ecclesiastical dynasty.
Mm,
Based in Iona, and
yeah.
then to be the abbot of Iona becomes very important,
Mm,
especially, I'm not sure the exact date, when the kings of Scotland start getting buried in Iona, because I know they
yeah.
were for some period, and then they essentially get driven out of Iona, or some of them they moved back to Ireland. They moved to Kells,
Mm,
which is why the Book of Kells is called Kells.
yeah.
First copyright law in Ireland, yeah, that the Dún Cow book.
Mm,
So one of the earliest copyright. It's never mentioned in Brehon law. When people talk about Brehon law, they forget that Brehon law was built up over centuries, and
yeah.
like the same with the law of the innocent. And
Mm,
I'm fairly sure that the guy, the priest who kind of organized it, Adamon, I think he's the guy who wrote the biography of Columkill.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's
And
all fascinating as well, because that's also a period as well, that you're dealing with. Like in that lifetime, you're dealing with Saint Columba, Saint Kieran, and you have Bridget all at the same time. Like so, like no wonder Ireland goes into the golden age of saints and scholars when you've got those three major players around the exact same time. Like Saint Bridget would have been an old woman at that point. Saint Columba is running around being a young madman, and then you have St. Kieran in Clonmacnoise at the same time with Dermot McCurble. So the administration in Ireland at the time must have been absolutely fantastic. The only problem is the fact that you have the plague that comes in, what the Justinian plague comes in around that time as
yeah,
well and causes havoc in Ireland, which you can see in the annals. It seems to indicate to the plague. There's a theory out there that that's why you have larger quote unquote Celtic fortifications. And then it suddenly changes to monastic settlements, but then you have ring forts left, right, and center. The reason why there's suddenly a distance and ring forts placed out left, right, and center. And remember, this is a historian's perspective, not an archaeologist or so anybody who specializes in that perspective point of view. The reason why you suddenly have a monastic settlement that's not, main assembly point that's not completely built up anymore, but instead you have ring forts kind of dotted out, is because of the the Justinian plague, that they were afraid to be very close to each other in case they would catch the plague and stuff. You seem to doubt that one, Owen.
yeah, because I think ring forts. Because I've read Matthew Stout's book on ring forts,
Mm,
and it's quite It's quite good.
yeah.
Um, and I think because they kind of go from the sixth to the ninth century. The
Mm,
Justinian plague, I think, was the fifth century.
yeah, it
So
was.
I don't. It's the ring forts start multiplying after Ireland becomes Christian,
Yeah.
because the pagan Gaelic era, the pagan Iron Age in Ireland, is very much a dark age.
Mm,
We have very little information about it. We know, in many cases, we know a lot more about previous and
mm,
later, but
mm,
not the Iron Age. Um, and from pollen samples, they've calculated that they reckon that the population fell because during the Iron Age, there's less cereals grown in
mm.
many places, and in many other places they start finding pollen of trees like
Yeah.
oak, birch, wild trees again.
Yeah.
Whereas a century after Ireland becomes Christian, you have
Mm,
this multiplication, massive multiplication of ring forts. I
yeah.
think there's 20,000 of them in Ireland, and I reckon there were double.
Mm,
So the population has expanded.
yeah.
And a thing I find very interesting is round where I am, because it's completely rural, there are loads of remnants of early Christian settlements, very early. Most of
Mm,
them would have been tiny. You're talking maybe a dozen people,
yeah.
sometimes less. And then 300 years later, you start having the emergence of bigger centers. So
Mm,
you have this massive boom in the first century post Patrick, and out of which, as you mentioned, Saint Bridget, Saint
mm.
Columkill, Saint the guy from Clonmacnoise, and also Saint Kevin.
Oh, yeah, St. Kieran.
And then I know Saint Mura he was a patron saint of the O'Neills. He was up in Ishowen, and
mm,
like you could go round Ireland and identify a load more. So you had this
mm,
explosion of small settlements everywhere.
mm,
Someone were trying to escape from the world, but a lot, a select few become they become very big. Like if you go to Glendalough,
mm.
you'll see it's not called a monastic settlement; it's called a monastic city, and
Oh.
there's a magnificent gateway into it, the only surviving one, and there
Mm,
was a kind of castle wall around it.
mm,
Um, the same Clonmacnoise
mm.
with Armagh and probably Kildare and probably a few other places. And then eventually you will like what's the island near Inishfallen near
Yeah.
Killarney.
Mm, mm,
Something
mm.
big was growing there. You have big churches starting to emerge.
Yeah, yeah,
And like sort of then along come the Norse and things start changing, and then you start getting more urban areas and cathedrals.
yeah.
So where like sort of when the Normans captured Dublin, there's already two cathedrals there.
Mm, mm, mm.
So
No, I
like
just
it's
for
like
anyone who doesn't know what a monastic settlement looks like at that period, that's what I'm talking about. There is this is an example of a monastic settlement, and it would have been where they would have held their assemblies and stuff.
yeah.
And then this is the ring forts as well in Ireland. So this is an example there of a cashel ring fort, stone ring fort. Do I have a farmstead ring fort? I wonder. I think I just have the cashel ring fort, a stone ring fort there. And then this is okay. So I'll get your interpretation of it. This is what we believe an Irish Moat Bailey castle looked like going into the 12th century. What's your interpretation, Owen, of Moat Baileys? Because I think they're very possible. Like if we look at castles, this is the castle here. I think castles are more difficult than Moat Bailey castles. What's your interpretation of a Moat Bailey
Well,
castle,
you
Owen?
see, that one that you showed is a bit um it's showing very high walls.
Oh, the
Most
castle here is a
Yeah, switch back to there. Those walls
yeah.
are very high.
Mm,
Most castles wouldn't have been that high.
yeah.
And there probably would have been a wooden palisade.
Yeah.
Um, so and it depends where the place was built,
Mm,
because like you are most of them are built for security rather than defense. Sort
yeah.
of you can keep your family inside if it's getting attacked. You could even bring in a few animals, maybe like if you have a special bull or something, or ducks. You can bring some of them in.
Mm,
Um, Many, when they've excavated, they found evidence of some sort of iron forging.
yeah.
There may have been a forge because you would have needed that. Um, but they were built in networks,
Mm,
so like all you have to do is keep people away for an hour, and theoretically you're going to be rescued by someone else. That
mm,
one looks to me a bit like Cahergal, which is near Carsavine, which has very high walls, but which is different than 90% of castles because it wasn't a homestead. It was some
mm,
sort of ceremonial center for the kings of that part of Corcadivna, the kingdom of Corcadivna.
yeah.
Because if you look at that, that's a bit like Grinon Alig up in Donegal,
Mm,
and there's a lot of work goes into that as opposed to most ring forts are much smaller, and the walls you can kind of jump over.
yeah. The lads are pushing over to St. Brendan. St. Brendan was around 510, wasn't it? Give us a second there. He's definitely very like I'm surprised how early St. Brendan pops up in the scene. And
That
goes off to
about
America.
3 kilometers from me is St. Brendan's Well,
Mm,
and he was from North Kerry,
yeah,
and he's associated a lot with Ardfert and Dingle. At
yeah,
that stage, Dingle Ivora and parts mid Kerry were the same kingdom called Corcadivna. Corcadivna is Dingle, but at that stage it
Mm.
was both. However, there's very
512.
little there's very little to do with St. Brendan in South Kerry, except for
Mm.
St. Brendan as well. And St.
Yeah.
Brendan's well faces the Blaskets and Dingle. So the
Mm.
story is that he came along in his boat. He
Yeah.
landed at the only place on the north of Valencia where there's not cliffs, and he came up. And then
Mm.
I like it a lot because there's an ancient well, but there's three very, very old crosses.
Yeah.
And then they say that he baptized three pagans he met there, and then they all died. So I can never
Yeah.
fully understand that miracle. But yeah, but he didn't go to America. He
Oh,
may have traveled a
yeah.
little bit. And the story is, you have to think of that story in a biblical perspective, like Jesus
Mm.
going into the desert for 4 days, etc. They would have sailed quite a bit out from the shore, but
Mm.
not to the Americas, not to the
Yeah.
Americas.
It's the whole region. Myself and Rachel were talking about it this week as well, going up from Ireland up to what was it called, Iceland, and over to
Yeah,
Greenland. And what was very shocking for us was the fact that we have this interpretation of us Europeans going over to America, not the other way around. What's very funny actually is that the natives go in and out of Greenland all the time. Like, we have this idea of who discovered Greenland first, the natives or the Norwegians in the 18th century, because when the Danish go up there, because the Danish they wake up one day in 1745 and they're like, oh, we forgot about the Greenlanders. We have to go and tell them about Lutheran and stuff. And so they sail up to Greenland and they find that the original Norse Greenlanders are missing. And what they find there instead is a bunch of people from Finland. They've sailed over and taken over Greenland and stuff. But on further research, they find that the people from the Canada, Newfoundland, Finland area is that they kind of blur in and out of Greenland over to America, well, the New World. And further DNA research into modern day Greenlanders who are quote unquote natives onto the island is that some of them actually have Norse DNA in their DNA structure. So they do reckon that there was marriages, and if you look at the what was it called, the what was it called, literature as well, there was definitely marriages happening between the Norse and the quote unquote native people going in and out of Greenland. But it's funny how they're constantly moving between the two. That we have this idea of us Europeans discovering America, not people from the Americans going into Greenland and perhaps even pushing over to Iceland and stuff as well, sailing over, going, oh, what's this over here? And then sailing over, which is interesting in itself. But my main point being is that perhaps there was some form of level of movement there, even if St. Brendan himself didn't manage to get over, that we perhaps, and I remember it was Katrina over in University College of Cork, turned around as well and said that you perhaps may have had fishermen who maybe sailed over and was like, oh, what's this over here? Or even got lost one day and suddenly appeared up around those regions of Greenland, America,
yeah,
up around that whole area, or even got talking to a local in that spot, had some form of communication going on there as well. Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny, like,
Two things. First of all, I'm fairly sure that before the Norse arrived in Iceland,
mm,
Irish monks had been there.
yeah,
I think it's proven that, or at least it's a story I've heard. It's way outside my area, but it's a story I've heard that there
mm,
were Irish monks there. And secondly, I'm fairly sure if you look at the original stories or tales or letters, documents about the Norse settlement of Greenland, that
mm,
there were, when they arrived, there were some. I'm not sure if they were Inuit. They nowadays are Inuit, but I'm not sure if they were
yeah,
at those stage. But like when the Norse arrived, I'm 95% sure there were people there before them.
mm. They reckon when they came in that there was no one at the time, right? But it does seem to blur in and out where you have people. Myself and Rachel were talking about that as well because it's only recent research into the climate change that was happening up in Greenland because it seems sometimes it gets really, really cold up in Greenland, which causes people to immigrate out of Greenland, except for the Norse. The Norse seem to hold on as much as possible because if you look into their diet up there, um, they'll stay up there to the point where they're eating walrus, which is very, even at the time, was meant to be quite foul for a lot of people to be eating. But the fact that they were sticking to the ground as much as possible, that they would end up eating all of their lambs and then switch to eating walrus, and then finally turn around and saying, allegedly turning around then at that point and saying, okay, let's abandon ship, let's sail over to Iceland at that point. But I suppose they had made such a, their life and dedicated it to Greenland because of the sale of ivory up there. Because it's believed right now that the colony collapsed because of the fact that ivory started becoming, less wanted because of the African and also the Indian and Asian market, that ivory had dropped down in value. Well, ivory from Greenland had dropped down in value, and they could no longer keep up with demand because they weren't making coins and stuff in Greenland. What they were using for currency in Greenland was just ivory. And anytime somebody needed more, more whatever, or they needed to pay off a debt in Europe, they would literally just throw ivory at them. So they weren't producing hard cash in Greenland, which caused a huge problem then going into the late medieval and Renaissance because Europe was no longer accepting their ivory. So they could no longer just suddenly, if they needed a whole load of resources from Europe or whatever, or needed to pay off a debt from Europe, they couldn't just throw ivory at the problem anymore. That in fact, when they tried doing that in the late medieval period, it was the church in Europe turned around and says, no, we won't accept this, go away, give us hard cash or nothing at all, which is definitely causing problems for the Greenlanders. Like,
Actually, Caveman is saying Irish monks were on the Faroe Islands as well. That I didn't know.
mm,
That I didn't know.
mm, wouldn't surprise me. Like, because as well, I remember Katrina from University College of Cork was saying that as well, is that you also, and you could definitely build upon this one, was the whole belief of putting yourself in God's hands, that you had both criminals and monks who would, well, monks were doing it, they were volunteering to do it, where they would jump on a boat and just go sailing off. But you also had criminals who would they'd be sentenced. They were causing a constant nuisance to the community, so they were like, okay, we'll just tie you up in a boat, chuck you on, and just kick the boat off. And if you get torn apart by the rocks, well, that wasn't our fault, that was God's will. But if you did survive, also that was God's will. Although the community probably crossed their fingers and hoped that you smashed off the rocks. And that was, God's will, But because of that, people were starting to appear left, right, and center. And they would have appeared in these places just off of the Faroe Islands and stuff for sure. Like, even with their shitty little cog boats and stuff. Although that was believed, St. Brendan's voyage was proven that you could actually arrive. Wasn't it proven in the 80s and stuff? Your man
Yeah,
made a documentary on that.
what's that guy name? He did a few boats. He did a few.
Yeah.
The Brendan Voyage.
Mm.
Yeah, sort of. But he's sailing west from Ireland, knowing
Ah.
that if you sail west, there's land. He's
Yeah.
like he's Tim Severn. Tim Severn.
Mm.
Um, he's not doing it in the 5th or 6th century where you don't know what's in front of you.
Yeah.
But I like they did reach Iceland and apparently the Faroes. But
Mm.
and like but I think you have to the currents etc. quite well, because if for example if you look at the Spanish and Portuguese ships heading
Mm.
from Spain and Portugal to South America, the Caribbean, they tend to there's a circular kind of motion,
Mm.
um, and Like the Portuguese were there first, and they would head down along the coast, the east coast, yeah, the east
Mm,
coast of Africa, or is it the west coast? Hold on, yeah, the west coast of Africa. I'm facing the wrong way,
mm,
and then to get to Brazil, they kind of would suddenly turn right. In fact, the discovery of Brazil is very suspicious because this guy's heading toward supposedly going to India in a big exhibition, and he turns right near the Cape Verde and ends up in Brazil.
mm,
Um, so, but if you look at the map, they would come back a different way.
mm,
So you need to know the currents and winds, etc. So I don't think Irish monks reached North America
mm,
because, like, the I also think that it's funny. Something happens in Ireland with as regards naval. So St.
mm.
Patrick is Irish are attacking Roman Britain, capturing
Yeah, they
St.
are.
Patrick, and like St. Patrick escapes on a boat that's trading from, I think it's Wexford, Waterford way.
Mm,
But then something like I know that some of the Gaelic Irish, some of the O'Neills fought and defeated the Norse with boats, but boats kind of disappear from Irish history, from the annals, etc. The
mm,
seagoing Ireland disappears. So
yeah.
I think in that initial post Patrick boom, they reached Iceland and Faroes, but then I don't think they would have been got enough manpower. They wouldn't have got reinforcements because, like the lads who arrived in Iceland, it would have been difficult for them.
Yeah.
It's a great place. It's far away from the world. But as you know, and they're not married. They're all supposedly single men, not having
Mm,
children, so they need reinforcements.
yeah.
Um, so because they're monks. Um, my wife was asking.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, so, like, if you look at colonization, even the Norse, they had great difficulty. First
Mm,
of all, in Iceland, and then in Greenland and Finland, you need a lot of people. For Irish monks to have reached North America, it would have taken another 100 years of a big westward boom in sailing, and that seems to have
mm,
disappeared because
yeah.
apart from after Saint Brendan, there doesn't seem to be any other story about monks sailing westward. It
Yeah,
suddenly disappears
it's.
for some reason.
I think it's because they're pushing more into Europe, to be honest with you, on because it's
Yeah,
after the sixth century. Once you have, there seems to be like during the period of Columbus, and Ciarán, they seem to be pushing more kind of northeast, and then suddenly going into the seventh and eighth century, when you're going just as you're going into what was it called? Saint Columbanus and those characters who were writing letters off to Rome and stuff. Then you have an interest of them trying to reconvert Rome back to Christianity and getting involved with the politics that are happening there. I think it's perhaps maybe it's after Saint Columbanus goes off to the north of Italy, then you have an interest in the Irish getting involved with more European politics. I think that may have been what's going on there. And then the Irish don't get reconnected into the North Atlantic until the arrival of the Vikings. I think that's what's
yeah.
happening there. And
Well,
then
I think
afterwards, they reconnect in
yeah.
there.
It another thing is like there is this initial boom.
Mm,
Skellig Michael gets set up. People they're going to various islands. Saint Kevin goes to his cave in in Glendalough. But then within 100 years, maybe even less, like Glendalough becomes starts becoming very big.
mm,
So the energy of the church changes. Some gets into Scotland, into France, St. Gall, going into Switzerland, into the north of Italy. And then others there, instead of going off looking for an island, looking for a cave, a
mm,
mountain,
yeah.
they are trying to participate in society.
Mm.
it's the direction of the church, of the people in the church changes.
Yeah. I love Saint Kevin. Saint Kevin's the one in Leinster, isn't he? The one who is
Glendalough,
constantly Glendalough.
Glendalough.
He's the one that kept punishing himself, wasn't it? He'd go off for about 30 days and starve himself and also put on the
Yeah,
furry tunic and stuff as well, wasn't he?
yeah, and like apparently there's one story that like he he's just standing there in the lake and
Hmm.
completely still, and I think a bird is supposed to have made a nest on him,
Yeah.
sort of,
But he
and then
wasn't St. Kevin really good at negotiation skills. Like he pulls Leinster out of a lot of diplomatic problems that they were having. Because Leinster's always been, isn't Leinster always the one that's in the most trouble? It's always in a
yeah,
situation where, sorry,
yeah, sort of,
yeah,
but that's because it's kind of caught. You have
yeah,
Munster below it,
mm,
Mead and Ulster, and then Connacht elsewhere. So because Leinster is much smaller,
yeah,
which is much smaller then than it is now,
yeah,
and yeah, and then like once the North arrive, it starts getting there's a lot of North there, Dublin and
yeah,
Wexford, um,
yeah. Because it
and Carlingford.
was Maynooth University this week was sorry, a few weeks back, Maynooth University on their podcast, Medieval Irish podcast, they turned around and made a very good point that in the book, The Foreign and the Gael, where it's the bibliography where Brian Brew is justified for fighting the Vikings and stuff, they actually refer to the men of Leinster during the Battle of Clontarf as foreign Irish, and when Maynooth University pointed out, I was like, oh, that's interesting that the men of Leinster are referred to as foreign Irish as well, Gall Gael. Like, is it down to the fact that they were just, they get branded as foreign Irish because they're rebelling against, quote unquote, the men of Ireland, Brian Bruce force? Or is it the fact that they were at that point going into the 11th century so mixed with the Norse? Because also, if you look at the Scandinavian sources, the likes of Nile Saga, and various other sagas, especially the Icelandic sagas, anytime they're saying, I'm related to so and so who's related to so and so, if they have an Irish link, they're always linking back to a Leinster branch, which is also very interesting. Because I know someone else pointed out early on as well, is that you do have famous characters like Broder E. Emer who related to various characters within the ENL. And I know Olaf the Peacock is also related to the ENL as well. But it's very interesting that the majority of the characters who pop up and say, "Oh, I'm related to so and so, who's related to this Irish person who's from Leinster," that seems to be a running theme. That it seems to me that the majority of Norsemen that become Gael Gael are related to Leinster men. So it could be a thing of that at that point Leinster was so kind of foreign to the rest of the Irish that that they're being branded as Gael Gael, which is also interesting because what's his name when Diarmid MacMail the Moor, when he's quote unquote considered high king, he's also very very mixed in with the Vikings as well. Like he becomes at one point king of Dublin as well. So it is very interesting that Leinster is considered very foreign to the rest of Ireland at
Yeah,
one
and
point.
but
Like,
I think you also have to take into account that source,
mm,
the the Cougar Gael
yeah,
Gaul, in that it's an O'Brien propaganda.
yeah,
And it works very well.
mm,
It's possibly the most successful piece of propaganda in Irish history. It
yeah,
because it um and like it pushes the idea of Brian as the emperor of the Irish and stuff like that.
mm,
Um, to so I think it was just yes, probably Leinster had a lot more Norse than elsewhere,
mm,
especially because of Wexford. And I'm not sure whether Waterford at that stage was regarded as being part of Leinster or Munster. It probably changed.
mm,
And I was about to say something else and I got confused. Um, Dem O'Brien's, as Wayne is saying, yeah, Dem
Mm,
O'Brien's. Um, yeah, sort of, and then again, Leinster is stuck and they're rebelling. At that
mm.
stage, they're rebelling, sort of, and the O'Briens are against them to a great extent.
It's interesting as well because Usher guy, we're talking about like Leinster being caught in the middle of all this fighting and stuff, and how they're constantly being crushed by the men of Munster, the men of Dublin, and also the men of the ENL, quote unquote, Confederation and stuff. But on saying that, Usher seem to be able to wiggle their way through the political situations a lot of the times, unscathed and stuff, and even writing anti Dublin propaganda and stuff. So it's very interesting how Leinster's constantly been slapped around the place, except for the period
and
where St.
reduced
Kevin is
and
running around
reduced
the place.
and
What's that?
reduced in size
Mm,
reduced in size. Like Osriga um, is essentially a border area between Munster and Leinster, and
mm,
it's able to play both off against each
yeah.
other.
Mm. They did such a good job at times, like, and the fact they were able to survive so long, like, even the fact that when the Butlers had taken over, they still kind of were able to become major players in that period. So it is interesting how that region seems to just continuously, like, even today, Kilkenny is still, even in the hurling and stuff, is still a major player in that regard. Like, I know they're
Yeah,
not a major player politically these days, like, but at least in the hurling and stuff, they're still smashing left, right, and center and stuff. So, Kilkenny, very, very interesting spot for sure. Like,
and there's been
just
a
popping
couple.
into this one.
There's been a couple more crashes. Okay, yeah. Is there a McDonald episode available, or one coming in the future?
The
Um,
old McDonald's, God, we seem to, when it comes down to these live streams and stuff, we seem to just, have an old chat and stuff. It's mostly Mihal from Clans and Dynasties. If you leave a comment below, he'll just talk away about the various families and stuff. I don't know if Mihal has a show up or a video dedicated to the McDonald's. The last time I was talking about the McDonald's was actually the other day on one of my shorts because they actually had their main assembly. Recent archaeological work was done on their main assembly. Oh God, I can't remember what the bloody castle is called right now, but it's just between Ireland and Scotland. The McDonald's ends up being the heads of the Lords of the Isles between Ireland and Scotland, and they made a lot of money with Gaelic. So first and foremost, with Gold Gael war bands going between Ireland and Scotland, and then later on, as we go into the what was it, the Brian O'Neill's Revolt and the Tamad Wars, and then going into the Scottish War of Independence, they make a lot of money. Bringing out their their gold. I suppose at that point, their Gallo Glass war bands, um, giving them off to the O'Briens, the O'Connors, and even setting up marriage alliances with the McSweeneys and the O'Connors in those regions. And they were also moving their war bands into Scotland and getting involved with private wars that were happening in Scotland, and also the fighting that was happening between was it Scotland and Norway. So the McDonald's ended up making a whole load of money during the what was it called, the High Middle Ages, and then going into late medieval period, because you had large amount of fighting happening with the O'Neills and also the Bruces as well. The kings of Scotland were also fighting the English, basically going into the Hundred Years' War. The MacDonalds end up making so much money, and also they were able to what was it called, adapt with the times. So they went from having very organized war bands with fantastic formations and stuff into much more organized Gaelic mercenary companies having proper what was it, contracts, and even on top of that, keeping up to the tactics of the warfare that was happening during the Hundred Years' War and stuff. So you could easily talk about the McDonald's for hours. Give us a second there. I'm sure
and
Mihal
then
actually has. What's that?
I think he
Keep
does,
going.
and then the McDonald's they, well, the Lordship of the Isles collapsed,
Mm.
and
Oh,
then
did
the
they?
McDonald's come, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
I think in the 14th century, and then the
Yeah.
McDonald's ultimately come a cropper with the King of Scotland,
Mm.
because the King of Scotland wanted to impose himself on them.
Yeah.
Because you'll often find that the MacDonalds sometimes would support the English against the King of Scotland because
Mm.
the King of Scotland is doing not nice things to the MacDonalds, but
Yeah.
they lose a lot of their power.
Yeah.
Um, then and then in Scotland they split into various lots of different branches, but
Yeah.
um, in the early modern period, you can see the rise of the power of the Campbells, who managed to get a lot of land in lowland Scotland
Mm.
and are always close with the king. They
Yeah.
kind of anglicize or Anglo Scotticize themselves and then turn Protestant.
Mm.
Whereas the MacDonalds are on the losing side like in the 1640s, in the 1715 and 1745.
Mm.
I think there may be one or two MacDonald lords left, but they're thoroughly anglicized.
Yeah.
Um, and then some of the MacDonalds move into Ireland.
Mm.
Dunluce Castle, they boot out the McQuinlans and they move in there. And then after the 9 Years' War, it's actually fascinating because um, one of like the McDonald's are fighting among themselves
Mm.
dramatically. There's a guy called Sorley Boy MacDonald, and then his sons and cousins. Oh, it's a nightmare. But one of them, he marries one of Hugh O'Neill's daughters, and then he's very pally with James I and Charles I. He's made the Marquis of Antrim,
Mm.
and in a way, he becomes he could be he's one of the richest men in Ireland, one of the most
Mm.
powerful, and he contributes to the beginning of all the wars in a way because he's trying to raise an army of Gaelic Irish, to
Mm.
go either to fight the Covenanters who had invaded England or to be part of Charles I's army.
Oh.
Um, and then, as a result of that, there is the famous in the 1640s O'Cahan. It's not
Mm.
sorry, it's what's his name? There's one of them. There's a MacDonald. He's supposed to be a really big guy, very famous, and he went over with several O'Cahan regiment or several O'Cahan companies, and
Mm.
they joined up with Montrose, and they beat the crap out of everybody for years
Mm.
before being ultimately destroyed. And then first, that guy MacDonald, I'm trying to remember his name and I can't. He comes back to Ireland and he ends up in one of the Confederate armies that's run by an old English general who's utterly terrible and gets killed in some massive defeat.
Mm.
Um, he's kind of credited with inventing the Highland Charge, which wasn't that old. His name is. It's bugging me. Give me
Yeah.
a minute. You talk and I look.
What the hell was I looking at? I was looking at something. Oh yeah, that was it for you lads. The Scottish clans on YouTube. He has a ton of videos on the McDonald's as well. That's the Scottish clans over on YouTube. If you want to, if you still can't find them, pop over to Mihal's channel on Clans and Dynasties. Go down to the bottom where he says Friends of Clans and Dynasties, and then zip over and you could see Scottish clans. He has I've been meaning to actually bring him on for the weekend and stuff, but God, he's terrible at answering his bloody messages on Facebook and stuff. I'll send him another message and see if he wants to jump on sometime because Mihal, he's jumped over to Mihal's live streams and stuff a few times. So I'll say it to Mihal, or I'll try to send him another message there, see if I can get him on, because you lads would love your man who runs the Scottish clans on YouTube. He's a brilliant man, very, very switched on when it comes down to, and he's qualified as well. He's got his qualifications over in the United States. So he's very, very qualified, and also on top of that as well, very knowledgeable. And he's had actually a good few academics over from Edinburgh University on his channel as well. So he's very, very switched on. He's not talking shite like a lot of channels do. So that's the Scottish Clans over on YouTube, and he's got a good few videos on the McDonald's. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. I remembered, with a little help from Google, it's
Mm,
Alistair McCullough Kyotuk MacDonald, or
mm,
Alistair McCullough. So he was a very important, very important MacDonald soldier in the
mm,
1640s. He was from a very minor part of the MacDonalds, and he was killed in the Battle of um, Knockhouse or Knocknouse
mm,
in
mm.
1647. It was like he shouldn't. I don't know why he ended up fighting in Munster with, because some of the Munster Confederate generals were crap.
Jesus. Terrible. Which yeah, I could bitch about that one as well. Especially during Cromwell's, sorry, not Cromwell's war, but what they're calling it now, the War of the Three Kingdoms.
Yeah,
Early on, Jesus, what the Irish thinking early on. But regardless, caveman, I just want to expand on a wee bit as well. Under Brehon law, foreigners gain legal rights when they married a native woman. I noticed that as well when I was reading Fergus Kelly's Brehon law. It seems to me, and maybe Owen will have a different interpretation on this as well. It seems that law was very much adapted for the Vikings, in my opinion. You know, as the Scandinavians are coming in and they're marrying local native women, that it seems to me that the local native women are kind of put in place in law to kind of keep an eye on them, that they take on the status of their wife when they're marrying into those areas and stuff. And it seems that Brehon law was adapted for the Scandinavians that were immigrating into Ireland in the 9th century. But that's my opinion. This is only my opinion going off Fergus Kelly's early Irish law. When you're talking about native women marrying foreigners that are coming into Ireland and stuff. But that's just my opinion about that.
and I
Like,
think you also have to remember that um there's law and there's law.
mm,
there's sort of there's these laws that people write and publish and try and, but
yeah,
whether they're enforced or not is
mm,
it varies. And sort of under Brehon law, foreigners gained legal rights when they married a native woman,
mm,
perhaps theoretically, but at the same time you had the Norse setting up what are effectively kingdoms, and
mm.
like sort of you have Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, Limerick. Cork doesn't seem to have been too powerful, though I could be wrong there.
Oh, they got
Um,
smashed by Cashel. That's what happened there. They set
yeah,
so you had St Finbarr's monastic settlement, and then at the same time you have the Men of Cork that set up in South Main Street. And then what happens is Cashel comes up there very early on and just smashes the place.
no,
And then they take the Bishop of Cork and bring him up to Cashel and starve him to death. So they are kind of little trade port, but they never get any bigger than what they should have been during the Viking Age because
yeah.
of the fact that Cashel was always smashing them.
And like so the Norse come in and they start, if the Norse gets Gaelicized,
Yeah.
except unlike most of the Gaelic Irish, they have towns like Dublin. Dublin
Mm,
becomes the most important city
yeah.
in Ireland. Sort of what law operated in Dublin, we don't really know.
Yeah.
They may have used some Brehon law. They would also use Norse laws,
Yeah.
and probably was a mixture of both.
Yeah, I
There's a
think it's the
couple of
same
people.
as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of people because we're running ish towards the end. A couple of people are
Mm,
asking about books.
okay.
Um, I had them here and they just moved. Yeah, what? Uh, so Caravaggio, who asked back about the McDonald's, asked what's the best books for laymen in your guys' opinion, and then Teresa Kidd just under that. What book would you recommend to an American author who's trying to research Ireland? My fiction book would be set in modern Ireland, but has a few Irish vampires. One that would be medieval old. Um,
Assuming you're talking about the late, when it comes down to vampire studies and stuff, I'd assume you'd be talking about the late medieval period. But like a lot of that stuff seems to come in with the Principality of Wallachia, which is on the opposite side. Um, like because the mythology of the Principality of Wallachia goes into pop culture. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of pop culture, I would look at Romania and the Principality of Wallachia to start
I
with.
was actually thinking, I was
Yeah.
thinking that it could be someone like, if you've ever read the Anne Rice books on
Mm,
vampires, like she brings in, like it's mainly set in the States,
uh,
but she brings in someone who was made a vampire under Rome. So
mm,
she just, and she has stories set back then.
yeah.
So maybe it's just general books about medieval and early modern history.
Mm.
Um, but I'm struggling to where to start.
Because we're mostly
Um,
Ireland has a lot of werewolves, especially if you're looking at the
no,
perspective of
not so much about the horror part, but
mm,
Irish history books for medieval period.
yeah.
So that for someone who wants to know the general history.
Yeah, because the
Um,
ones I have here on default is this one here. Which I thought was an amazing book, to be honest with you. And what else do I have here on default? Give us a second there. There's another good one actually on default. Oh yes, the one we were talking about earlier today. I could have actually chucked dead the reference. Life of Saint Columba. That's also a very
okay.
very good book as well, and it's all actual sources as well. Do, do, do. What was it called? A lot of you guys constantly ask about Vikings and stuff. One of the best books to get on that actually is what's her name? Claire Downham's book on the Viking kings of Dublin and Ireland, the dynasty of Ivar to AD 1014. So if you guys are interested in quote unquote Irish Vikings, the Gaul Gael, definitely pick up Claire Downham's book on Viking kings of Britain and Ireland, the dynasty of Ivar to AD 1014. So that's an amazing book for anyone who's interested in Irish Vikings and stuff. What books are you thinking of on?
I would think. I think Matt, is it Matthew Stout? He has a good one on medieval Ireland, basically from 400 to 1100. It's a
Mm,
good introduction.
yeah.
Slightly later, Hiram Morgan's Tyrone's Rebellion is
Mm,
good because it presents you with very a deep dive into O'Neill and O'Donnell's
mm,
lordships, and it shows you how Gaelic lordship was operating.
yeah.
Um, then there's some more general ones like general like by Nicholas Canny and Ellis on
Mm,
16th, 17th century. Um, and then uh, there was from kings to warlords by, I think it's by Catherine Sims, and there's a couple more
mm,
by her. If Mihal was here, he would recommend something by McCotter. I can't remember McCotter's first name. He has very good stuff on medieval Ireland, high medieval Ireland, and
mm,
the that sort of stuff. But then, if you have a look at my videos, always have references because there's so many books. It's hard to to if I could just put that, if we could press pause on the podcast and give me half an hour, I'd come back with a lot. But if you go to my channel and have a look at the different videos, there's references on underneath them all.
mm,
And then another way, if you don't want books, is podcasts. Well,
yeah.
there's our videos, Mihal's videos, and then like you've mentioned the Irish Medieval History podcast, which is excellent.
Yeah.
And then Finn Dwyer's one is very good as well.
Mm, mm, mm. And you also have History Ireland as well. Every once in a while, they do a good one on the medieval period as well. So you got History Ireland. Oh, this is over on Spotify, by the way, where you have History Ireland. You have Medieval Irish Podcasts by Maynooth University. And also you have, who was the other person? Finn Dwyer's Irish history podcast, isn't it? The Irish History
Yeah,
Podcast.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What was it called? History
His, his,
Ireland.
his,
Yeah, go on.
they have what they call head schools.
Mm.
I know they had a very good one on Brian Boru and Clontarf,
Yeah, that was brilliant.
and they've had a few others I've listened to,
Mm.
um, but they're quite good.
Yeah.
RTE has some stuff. Um, I know there's a
Ar-
history show on RTE, but I don't really listen to it. Sort of.
RTE is so hit or miss. Sometimes they do stuff and they're just absolutely amazing. And then sometimes they just bring on a random person and it's like, who the hell is this guy like? And they'll start
Yeah,
waffling about the most random
T,
stuff.
T, Tina G does very
Mm.
good documentaries,
The energy
but
is very good.
they would be more and more recent Irish history.
Yeah.
Like on Irish musical history, if you're interested, they do great stuff.
Mm.
But they have a tendency to produce, maybe because not expected to be popular or whatever. So they produce some very good videos. I remember years ago watching on RTE an interesting documentary about Bruce in Ireland.
Mm. That was done by Trinity University and Edinburgh University. And who was it that was sponsoring that originally? It's all over the place now. I think it was the um, BBC or somebody who originally sponsored that one, but it was between Trinity and Edinburgh University, and it was absolutely spectacular. That one on the Bruce in Ireland, it was an absolute brilliant documentary. And then Artie put together the same similar group as well for the Norman invasion of Ireland, which was only about 4 years ago. You can get it on YouTube now. It's another brilliant documentary that's of the similar style that was organized between Artie and Trinity University. So it's got Sean Duffy in there as well. Sean Duffy, we're still waiting for Sean Duffy. He was meant to release the book on that last year, which is called, what was it called? Invasion 1169. And Sean Duffy's one of the main editors on it. He's got other people as well jumping on there. But his book keeps getting delayed more and more. So that's Invasions 1169. He's got it delayed again. Like I don't know when he's meant to come out. It's meant to come out in the next month or two, but I reckon it'll probably get delayed again. I don't know what's going on with that book. It seems to be turning into one of them. But there's a few other books as well. They're very delayed as well. It's in the Four Courts. If you type it, actually, that's a good website. Is the Four Courts? If you, what do you know what I'll do is I'll
Four
just
Courts
chuck,
Press.
yeah,
Four
Four
Courts
Courts
Press.
Press. They always have magnificent books inside there. If you want to actually, I'll chuck it into. Oh Jesus Christ! Thank you so much, lad. I'll highlight your comment there. Royal Vampire poem inspired by Brian. Yeah, that's cheers for that, man. You're sent for that one. And thanks for the fiver as well. That means the world. I chucked that in there. The Four Courts Press. I don't know how they are for delivery online. I think somebody was complaining that they're terrible for delivering over to the States. I don't know what they're like delivering over to the States because there's tons of Irish Americans and also Canadian Americans as well. They're always complaining about the Four Courts, so they're terrible delivering over
There's,
to the States.
there's also Irish Academic Press,
Mm,
which is quite good, and UCC Press are
mm,
quite good. They bring out some very very big books.
mm.
They've a couple on the Iver Peninsula. They've one on the famine, one in the Civil War, one on Irish coastal history,
Mm.
and then
You okay?
yeah, yeah. Just trying to. It's not turning up. This one is a
Mm.
very good book I got a month or so ago. Churches in the Irish Landscape.
Yeah.
Churches in the Irish Landscape. Yeah, it's very very good.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I chucked that link as well into the
Yeah.
comment section for you lads as well. I don't know if Owen's lot can see that. You probably got that as well. If you're over on Owen's side, give us a comment there to see if you got that one. what was it called? Because I know there's one on, if you go into the page now, there's one on Skellig Michael, and the other one is Textures of Ireland, is the other book. A lot of conversations and stuff on those two books. And what other books do they have these days on the side there? The university. I'm looking at University College of Cork right now. A lot of modern books in there. Gaelic Wexford from the 15th to the 17th century. It's an interesting one.
And then another one is another publisher is Wordwell. They
Mm,
do History Ireland and a lot of archaeology stuff. And
yeah.
sometimes they do very very nice like sales.
Mm. Just having a gawk, to be honest with you, over on the UCC side. Dun, dun, dun. A lot of modern books, though, off the UCC side, though. A ton of modern books. Compared to the forecourts, I think there's more medieval books over in the forecourts
Yeah.
than there is on the UCC right now. Christ, I have a lot of modern books. Do, do, do. Right. And what was the other one? You said the Irish Academic
Irish
Press as well,
Academic
didn't you?
Press. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have an old Glock over on our side as well. Actually, I'll be faster using the, what's it called? The voice thing. Irish Academic Press. There we go. And that works straight away. So I'll put that link actually. See if it loads up there. Yeah, that linked work. And I'll shove that one up as well for you guys. The Irish, yeah, they're promoting their new book as well. What was it called? The Irish Republican Brotherhood from 1914 to 1924. A lot of modern books as well on their side. They have a book on Roy Keane out. Jesus. Let me see now because they have entire
Yeah,
categories
I
gone.
just grabbed a few books off my shelf, and they're all Four Courts Press. I think yeah, Four Courts Press.
Yeah.
Sort of that has a lot of stuff, and then
Mm,
they're good because okay, it's not coming up. They do a series like this,
mm.
and it's softback because like
Yeah.
if you go and buy an academic book when it comes out originally, it's going to
Mm,
cost you 50 or more euros.
yeah.
Whereas when it comes out in softback,
Mm,
it's half the price.
mm, mm, mm. Irish doctors in the Second World War. The cover of that one looks quite nice. And once again, the academic one is got a ton of modern books. I haven't seen a single medieval book since I went on to a lot of modern books. Bum, bum, bum. It's funny. Ireland just loves producing the myths. It likes producing a lot of what was it called? Modern history books compared to medieval history books. Compared to our neighbour in England, England loves producing medieval books on medieval books on medieval books, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Where we seem to tend to go more to around the 19th century up to the modern day, you know? We seem to produce a lot of books around that, you know? It's funny,
Yeah,
like,
because the way, like, if you do, unless it's changed, if you do history in the Leaving Cert,
mm,
it's basically 19th century,
yeah,
sort of maybe even from after the famine.
mm,
But the majority of Irish history will concentrate on um, from
mm,
1790
yeah,
to the 1990s, sort of
yeah,
modern Ireland. Then there
mm,
is a few that do early modern, and then medieval and ancient is the the least. I think it's the smallest, but there's still a lot of very good stuff there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the comments, yeah, Kino, like only in Ireland would they make a big, massive, what was it called, historical book on Roy Keane, like, you know?
And then
I'm still waiting for, what was it called?
you see him there's some advertising campaign with him on at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that I keep seeing.
yeah. That's the first medieval book I've seen on what was it called? The Irish Academic Press is Viking Dublin, the Word Key excavations. That's a brilliant book. If you're into Viking history and you want a very deep, detailed thing on it, is Viking Dublin of the Word Key. I've got that in my parents' house back in Ireland. Absolutely brilliant book. Like a big, heavy book though. I couldn't bring it over to Asia, but it's a brilliant, brilliant book. Like the Cross of Con. So it's mostly archaeological books that I have on this site that I've seen so far. I haven't seen any juicy stuff that I'm seeing over in the Four Courts. Four Courts has a lot of good academic books. All right, ebooks. What ebooks do they have? Oh, there's a few books in here I might try to get a hold of.
You
Jesus.
disappear there.
Oh, my gun gone, huh?
No, no, disappearing into buying books.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Right, I'm going to kick you guys off there so I can go start buying books, especially since we've hit the 2 hour point, right? If you guys want to sponsor me buying books, head on over to my Patreon or subscribe here, okay? So if you guys send me money there, I can head on over to the Four Courts and start buying books. And also, what was it, tomorrow, lads, as well. If you head on over to my Patreon, I'm actually doing a class over on Patreon tomorrow on the Lordship of Ireland during the 13th century. And mostly tomorrow, actually going to mostly focus on Maurice Fitzgerald, the second Lord of Offaly. Absolute lunatic. I don't know what you know about Maurice Fitzgerald, Owen, but I was doing a lot of research on him for the last 2 weeks, and I have a presentation for him tomorrow over on my Patreon. It's about 20 quid a month, and I do classes every Sunday around 9 o'clock Irish time. And I think somebody was saying it was around 5 p.m. New York time. So if you're interested in that, definitely head on over to my Patreon. And tomorrow I'll talk about the Lordship of Ireland, which was the realm basically ran by these Anglo Irish lords, these lords that were going between the Irish world and the English world at the time. And the main fella that was running that, the administration side of things, during the period I'll be covering tomorrow, was a guy called Maurice Fitzgerald, the second Lord of Offaly. Wild, wild fella. He ends up getting chopped up in the end during a duel against the O'Donnells, and he built a castle
They
in
all do.
Sligo. What's
They
that?
all do. They all
Yeah.
end up getting chopped up.
But he built he absolutely was. He had territory in safe areas like Munster and also in Leinster. But he goes off and he builds a castle in Sligo. And he spends his entire life pretty much going to war with the O'Connors and the O'Neills. And just sometimes, like, he ends up getting called back to London and get given out to it because he's just going from war to war to war against the O'Connors and the O'Neills, and he escalates situations when he doesn't need to escalate them whatsoever. And he's meant to be keeping the king's peace, well, the English king's peace in Ireland during the 13th century. And he doesn't do that whatsoever. He just goes to war, to war, to war, to war, and constantly has conflict when he wasn't supposed to be having conflict whatsoever, which gets him into trouble with not only Gaelic kings and his other lords in Ireland, but also gets given out to by the English king. And he completely ignores them, even when he's punished by the English king, completely ignores them and goes back to Ireland and then continues fighting wars in Ireland. So definitely very, very interesting, guys. So if you're interested in that, definitely head on over to my Patreon before tomorrow so you can jump on and listen to me talk even more about Maurice Fitzgerald. Owen, how do we support your addiction to books and how you like to talk about history as well? How do we support this addiction?
I just threw into the private into the private chat my Buy Me a Coffee account.
Happy days.
Um,
I'll chuck that onto
I have a Buy
the
Me a
chat as
Coffee
well.
account. I also have YouTube.
Yeah.
I released a video last night on St. Bridget.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so if you want to watch that, I'll have a couple of shorts coming out over the next couple of days. And then hopefully
Nice.
next week another video. I'm trying to do a long video every 2 weeks, every week.
Mm,
Struggling away, and buy me a coffee are the best ways to support me at the moment.
yeah. Happy days. Other than that, guys, thanks very much for all the support. And as well, your lad who gave me the fiver early on, thank you so much for that as well. It means so much. Other than that, guys, thanks very much. And slán go bhfaile. Bye.
And
Bye,
happy
bye, bye,
happy
bye.
Saint Bridget's Day to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Happy St. Bridget's Day. St. Bridget's Day over here, for God's sake. Happy St. Bridget, guys. See ya. Enjoy your sausage and sausages tomorrow and stuff.